So welcome again on this 4th of July. Thank you so much for being here with us. I hope you have a fabulous celebration today with friends and family, or however you're going to celebrate. I hope you have a wonderful 4th. I'd like to spend some time today talking about one of the rights guaranteed to us in our founding document, or one of our founding documents, the Declaration of Independence. And what I'm talking about is the pursuit of happiness. It's interesting to note that we are not guaranteed actual happiness. That was a lift a bit too far even for the founders to manage. No, we have the right to the pursuit of happiness. So what I was thinking about today is, as we pursue it, where do we look? And what do we find? How are we exactly doing that? In its second paragraph, the Declaration of Independence articulates the individual rights that our founders, at least, saw as our natural, God-given rights. The right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And what we do, I think, is we bind all these rights up together, all these notions up together in the idea of freedom, the idea of independence. Every 4th of July, we celebrate the idea that we are an independent people, collectively and individually. So, since July of 1776, we have identified other rights arising from these, like the right to privacy, the right to marry, the right to travel, this stuff that's not even in the Constitution, but we have taken those foundational rights that are, and we have expanded it to include these other fundamental rights that we've identified as our society has evolved and grown and changed. Our understanding of happiness, of liberty, is not the same as it was over 200 years ago. However, the entire sweep of these rights we have later identified, and which we continue to identify, arise from the fundamental truths about who we are individually and who we are as a community. The Declaration also stated outright, and this was an amazing contention for the time, that these individual rights endowed by our Creator are unalienable rights. Now, this is a term that thrills the hearts of lawyers. Speaking as one, it does, but it may be meaningless to other people. But we have to remember that Thomas Jefferson was a lawyer. But it's important. That language is important from a civic and perhaps even a spiritual perspective. An unalienable right, or an inalienable right, however you want to say it, means that these are rights which nobody can take away from you. They cannot be alienated, taken away from you. Not only can they not be taken, they also cannot be given, even if you wanted to. That's what unalienable means. They are bound to you for always. What a powerful statement in a political document. It's a recognition of the fundamental principles about the nature of our humanity and the basis for our living together in civic community. Our lives together, in principle, if not always in practice, are not based on power, on title or heritage, on economic means, but on the inherent dignity and value of every single one of us. We don't always get it right, for absolute sure, but we keep trying with those principles as our true north. So Abraham Lincoln saw the Declaration as a moral statement, as a call to action, not just a political document. He once pointed out that the Declaration of Independence could have established national independence without the second paragraph at all. There was no need to mention human rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. As he wrote, "The assertion that all men are created equal was of no practical use in effecting our separation from Great Britain." As he saw it, the founders set out a timeless truth for future use. It may have been a political statement, but it was also a declaration of who we are as human beings. He wrote, "It was not the mere matter of the separation of the colonies from the motherland, but something in that declaration giving liberty not alone to the people of this country, but hope to the world for all future time. It was that which gave promise that in due time the weights should be lifted from the shoulders of all men, and that all should have an equal chance." That was his address in Independence Hall on February 22nd, 1861. The courageous men and women who risked everything, their fortunes, reputations, their very lives, to travel the road toward independence, were students of the Enlightenment. that age in which ideals of liberty and equality and the belief in rational and free inquiry in place of superstitious orthodoxy came to the fore. It was a time of the expansion of belief in the nobility of each human being. These revolutionaries had a new and a different belief in who they were, in who they had a right to be. They gave that ideal to their posterity, otherwise defined as us. They wanted us to know that it is who we are as well. And so they envisioned and created a system of government that they hoped would promote these values in our civic life. Did they fall short in practice? We know that they did, often and egregiously so. We still struggle with those legacies of racism, of oppression, of sexism, of the marginalizing of all who are seen as the other. But that doesn't dilute the power of the vision that they left us. It means that they fell short, but it is a call to action to us to live up to those ideals every day. Others stepped in later to articulate the spiritual aspect to this energy of independence. So when you're considering who you are, what God-given rights you have, the very truth of your being, there is undoubtedly a spiritual aspect to that question and to that journey. So about 60 years after the Declaration, on July 15th, 1838, Ralph Waldo Emerson stood in front of the graduating class of the Harvard Divinity School. He spoke to 6 graduates. There were 7, but one didn't show up. Their families and the faculty. His Divinity School address, which you can still find and read, even though it was given to so few listeners, is one of the foundational documents of American New Thought philosophy. I encourage you to read it if you haven't already. At that point in his life, Emerson was a former Unitarian minister. He had stepped back from the ministry. He had defrocked himself after his study of Eastern religions convinced him that Christianity was not the sole revelation. He was a leader of the Transcendentalist movement, teaching that God was found in nature and in each individual and could not be defined by the structures that we humans have created to discuss or to transmit our version of the holy. God is beyond all that. On that day, he spoke of the power of each of us to experience the divine without external help or guidance. In his address, he urged the graduates to, quote, go alone, to refuse the good models, even those that are sacred in the imagination of men, and dare to love God without mediator or veil. He told them to do it themselves, approach the holy themselves. He spoke of an indwelling supreme spirit and of a vision as, quote, similar to that of the Eastern sages, where we are neither fallen nor depraved, and where divinity incarnates at every instant, not just once in the distant past. He reminded them that God is, not was, in them, as them, right then. As Yahweh said to Moses from the burning bush, I am, ever present, ever creating, ever new. Emerson understood that in truth, he was of spirit. This was a profound statement and an amazingly revolutionary one for that time. Naturally, the graduates loved his speech, but the powers that be, not so much. He was banned by Harvard for the next 20 years. So just as Emerson declared our freedom to find our own spiritual path, just as the colonies threw off the yoke of what had been, so are we invited to take a new form, driven only by what spirit within calls us to be. We are always called to be new. This is especially true right now for us individually and collectively as we emerge from the past year and a half to a new and a very different world. We have such an opportunity right now to imagine how we want our new fabric of relationships to look like and how we individually can seek and find what fulfills us. This year of COVID has been, among many other things, an invitation to reset and reevaluate, to ask ourselves what makes us free, what makes us happy, What a wonderful question for this July 4th, 2021. So this is where I started thinking about independence and liberty and happiness. It seemed to me that all these ideas are mixed up together, and we sometimes conflate our idea of happiness with our current notions of personal liberty. I kept having the feeling that we're getting it backwards. So does my happiness depend on my ability to go it alone as long as you stay out of my way? Does it? The more I think about it and the older I get, the more I believe that it does not, even though this idea is so embedded in our national psyche. We hear so much about our personal freedoms today, don't we? We work so hard to identify and safeguard our rights to take a range of actions, no matter the impact on others. We've seen it lately in what? Masks. We see people pulling guns on other people because they are asked to wear a mask. There is a lot of strong feelings on that issue, and it's an issue of personal liberty for so many people. I declare my right not to provide you services if I don't agree with your religion or your lifestyle. I declare my right not to have my children vaccinated against childhood diseases. I declare my personal rights in so many areas. Each one of these rights that we so fiercely defend is bound up in the concept of our freedom. It was the Continental Marines back in 1775 who first flew the flag that proclaimed, "Don't tread on me." It was called the Gadsden flag because it was designed by some guy named Gadsden. And so many still point to that sentiment today as the ultimate expression of what it means to be an American. Don't you dare tread on me. But just as we as a people continue to reinterpret our Constitution and the protections it affords to us in an evolving society, we also have the chance to reconsider our idea of individual and collective happiness. It seems to be a time for us, and the last year has surely been an invitation for us to look for a more, dare I say it, collective view of community well-being and of our individual happiness. Up to now, we've conceived of the American community flourishing and ourselves flourishing individually when every individual is out for him or herself. I think not so much. At least in the realm of personal fulfillment, it struck me in thinking about this talk that independence is overrated. We are not independent at all. We treasure being politically independent, but that's another thing. I can vote for who I like. I can believe in whatever political philosophy appeals to me, but we turn this political guarantee into a philosophy of personal autonomy on steroids. And I think we lose a great deal when we do that. Look at it this way. So much of what we value about ourselves, about our lives, is expressed only in relationship. If I am a healer, there must be somebody I can heal. If I am a singer or a musician, there has to be somebody who can hear it, who can appreciate the gifts I am sharing. If I am a business person, there must be somebody who wants to buy what I sell, or it's just not working. Our entire civic fabric is bound up in the vitality of our relationships and of our connections. We are so not independent. The fact that we need community to flourish is a surprise to no one. Our search for community remains so strong because on a visceral and an unconscious level, we know that we are already connected. It's who we are. We are trying to complete that connection that makes us whole. It's like an electrical circuit. We are alive when we are connected. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote about these connections that bind us. He wrote, "All men are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be." He spoke of the beloved community, community representing the love of God in lived reality. Community reflects the divine found and experienced in relationship. This web of mutuality, it supports us, it teaches us, it awakens us. It is through this web of mutuality in which we build those qualities, those essential human virtues that make us better people and that will make our world a richer and a kinder and a more prosperous place. And don't we know that now, after this COVID virus has totally taken us to school for the past year and a half on how connected we all are. This virus is not shy at all about how demonstrating how my choices affect you profoundly. So, instead of assuming that it is our personal liberty, our independence that will bring us happiness, let's ask ourselves what it is we are really seeking. Do you remember my conversation with Brian Perry a few weeks ago? He gave us a great idea. He invited us to look beneath what we say we want and take a look at what it really is that we are seeking. So when we talk about our personal autonomy, our God-given liberty in so many areas of life, including those that impact others, what result are we looking for? What are we really saying in some part? In thinking about this, I think that what we are looking for often is the affirmation of our own unique value. The fact that we have something to say, that we have something to give. I am here. Listen to me. Pay attention. Even if I'm not rich or famous, I have a right to be heard. Don't you have that feeling sometimes that so many of us today just feel like we don't feel seen or heard or valued? However, ironically, it is not our independence, but it's our connections that give us this assurance. It's our relationships, our place in our own communities that show us, that tell us that we have unique value, that we are respected and honored, that we are seen, and that we are heard. We don't thrive by having no restraints and unlimited choice. We thrive when we have a place and a value and we know it and our community knows it. These are values of relationship, community, and connection. The Stoic philosopher Seneca wrote that our relations with each other are like a stone arch, which would collapse if the stones did not mutually support each other, and which is upheld in this very way. It's a great image. We are strongest when we support each other. Rabbi Terry Bookman tells a story. A man in a boat began to bore a hole under his seat. When his fellow passengers asked him what he was doing, he said, "What do you care? Am I not boring under my own seat?" On this July 4th, we have an opportunity to realize and embrace that we are all sitting in one boat. Like President Lincoln, we can choose to see the Declaration as a continuing call to action, to refashion our American future, to become that place of beloved community where all have an unalienable right to be respected and valued and seen and heard, where we know and find what truly makes us happy, what truly makes us free. What a gift to our posterity.